Would you say that social media have had a rather positive or negative impact in your life? I made a community post asking that same question recently, and yeah, let's look at the results. Okay, I'm looking at them right now, and we've got 8% for mostly positive, 34% for somewhat positive, 40% for somewhat negative, and 18% for mostly negative. I can't see it here, but I think I had more than 10k answers. The poll reflects the intuition or even gut feeling that social media are just bad. But we are an enlightened species, so we do not stop at common sense. So what does the science actually has to say about this? Are we just fooling ourselves thinking that social media are inherently bad? Or are we, in fact, the anxious generation?
Australia is to ban children from using social media.
Is there something different happening to the brain, to our compulsion with social media? Is it right to even say that social media is an addiction?
Why I should delete my social media?
One of them is for your own good, and the other is for society's good.
Okay, so in the last few days, I literally threw myself into an academic debate on whether social media are the reason why so many young people, mostly, are depressed. The whole debate started because clearly we are not doing well. In March 2024, psychologist Jonathan Haidt published this New York Times best-selling book, The Anxious Generation. He said that the reason why Gen Z is so depressed is because of social media. But the reason why it triggered a lot of conversations, a lot of discourse, is because he also came with a set of measures. First one is no smartphones before high school. The second rule is no social media before 16. Okay, rule number 3, phone-free schools. In all schools, from elementary through high school, students should store their phones, smartwatches, and any other personal devices that can send or receive texts. And the fourth and final rule, far more unsupervised play and childhood independence. The reason why I mentioned those things is because this is happening right now. You know, governments, countries all around the world are starting to implement those measures. So Haidt is kind of winning the debate so far. I think we can all agree that they are quite rigid, drastic. It makes me wonder, are social media that bad? If Haidt, a psychologist and a professor, came to those conclusions, that means that he has some studies to back it up. In fact, he and his team used a variety of studies and showed a correlation between, on the one hand, a sharp increase in teenagers' self-reported anxiety and feeling of depression, as well as hospitalization for self-harm, and on the other hand, an increase in phone use. For Haidt, the correlation is strong enough to draw conclusions. He said that Gen Z went through a great rewiring between 2010 and 2015. 2010 to 2015 are the years where social media really boomed. Everyone had to be on it. 2012 was the year where we got the front-facing cameras. But first,
let me take a selfie.
For Haidt, we girlies are the biggest losers of the great rewiring. Our mental health has been really, really bad. My view on this gap between girls' mental health and boys' mental health is, I think, related to the fact that girls are overprotected by parents for safety reasons. Girls get way less permissions to go outside, play outside than boys. Girls' activities tend to be indoors, so following Haidt's logic, that means that girls are more often around phones, more often on social media, and therefore that can have a bad impact on their mental health. Insecurity, safety, these are words that also come back in the counter-arguments to Haidt's theory of the phone-based anxious generation. Those counter-arguments come from a group of psychologists and professors who are opposed to Haidt because they don't believe that Gen Z's poor mental health can be attributed to a single cause, social media. For them, the distress rather comes from various social and economic factors like climate change, financial insecurity, gender-based violence, racist attacks, or mass shootings. The biggest criticism so far has come from Candice Odgers, who wrote an article in Nature. She and a network of psychologists and professors have looked at the various studies and concluded that they are either bad or unscientific in some way, in the sense that they draw causation from correlation. Now you have to understand that that is a pretty serious attack. The goal of science is to go beyond common sense correlations to get as close as possible to truth. So saying to a scientist that they confuse correlation and causation is pretty much the same thing as saying, you're not a scientist. Yeah, I know, that's a pretty big blur. The Nature article and the criticism that came after it depicted Haidt as a charlatan, surfing on a trend to get money for his research and grow his team. Is it true though? Is Haidt a charlatan? So now we have two teams. The alarm ringers who believe that social media use leads to bad mental health, and the skeptics who believe that we should rather look at a variety of social factors to understand why Gen Z and millennials are so depressed. the alarm ringers went back to the bad studies and explained what they meant. They also argued that the skeptics are way too skeptical. They want the perfect study, where the only variables are social media use and mental health. They want participants to be completely isolated from any other variable, but that is just not feasible. They say that the perfect study does not exist. We have to draw conclusions from correlations, and according to them, the correlations that they see in those studies are conclusive enough. And finally, they also use the sort of more panic atmosphere to say that we need to act quickly. Legislators have to pick a side. Haidt says that they have to pick the alarm ringers. They have to apply those measures and take that risk. No, says the other side. You can't sacrifice scientific truth for an immediate solution. What does it say about us scientists? The goal of science is to get as close as possible to truth. We don't test results on large populations unless we're quite certain of the outcome. In that case, we're not certain of the outcome. One of the It's Complicated researchers, I call them It's Complicated because I've seen the phrase It's Complicated in so many of their articles. I feel like it better suits them than the word skeptic. So one of the It's Complicated researchers, called Aaron Brown, wrote this piece in which he addressed the whole issue, and it's kind of spicy. The 301 studies that make up Haidt's informal meta-analysis are typical in this regard. He doesn't seem to have read them with a sufficiently critical eye. Some have egregious errors. One study he cites, for example, clearly screwed up its data coding. Another study he relies on drew all of its relevant data from study subjects who checked 0 for everything relevant in a survey. Serious researchers know to exclude such data because these subjects almost certainly weren't honestly reporting on their state of mind. Haidt is promoting his findings as if they're akin to the relationship between smoking cigarettes and lung cancer, or lead exposure and IQ deficits. None of the studies he cites draw anything close to such a connection. What Haidt has done is analogous to what the financial industry did in the lead-up to the 2008 financial crisis, when they gathered a bunch of mortgage assets of bad quality into a package that got good ratings. He says a bad study is like a bad mortgage loan. Packaging them up on the assumption that somehow their defects will cancel each other out is based on flawed logic. And it's a recipe for drawing fantastically wrong conclusions. In this other article I found, another It's Complicated researcher compiled various studies that prove Haidt wrong. You can pause and have a look at them individually. I won't go through all of them, there are a lot. Again, the fight never ends, and that's a good thing. Haidt and his team responded to the criticism and came back with other explanations. From then on, the academic debate turned into a battle of studies, and journalists obviously got involved. Now is the time where I can be a bit more judgmental. So New York Times journalists did what most centrist journalists do. They rather side with the conservative opinion, so Haidt's opinion, because they don't want to be perceived as too left-wing. I don't believe centrists care about anything else but being perceived as centrist, but that's my opinion. Actually, no, it's not just an opinion, because their obsession with being perceived as centrists actually prevents them from observing basic rules of science. Like, look at this article. So basically, the journalist says that because you have more studies showing that there is a link between social media use and bad mental health than there are studies showing a positive relation or neutral relation, then we can conclude that, yeah, there is a correlation, a causation between social media use and bad mental health. But that is just not scientific. You can have 50 garbage studies saying social media bad and 10 studies saying social media neutral or good, and you'll have to believe the 10 studies. Quality is more important than quantity. I guess those journalists remind us that we crave answers. A single, unified answer, rather than a it's complicated. I mean, let's do a little test. Let's compare these two covers. The Anxious Generation, on the one hand, written by Haidt, and It's Complicated by Dana Boyd. Both books deal with a very similar topic, but the titles are different, and one title is more appealing than the other one. Guess which one? What is the title of my video? We're drawn to simple answers like social media bad and simple solutions like ban social media. But as Aaron Brown wrote in his reply to Haidt, prohibition rarely has its intended effect. It often drives behaviors underground, making them harder to monitor and thus less safe. In this case, if there were a law preventing teenagers from having social media accounts, they might switch to harder to regulate forms of connecting online that are further outside their parents' purviews. Or they might find new activities with new risks. The only certainty is that they won't go back to doing what teenagers did 20 years ago. It is in fact complicated. That academic debate never ends. Yet, I feel like we have to acknowledge people's gut feeling that social media are bad. Because if we don't do so, it kind of feels like gaslighting. It kind of gives facts don't care about your feelings. And you don't want to be the person saying this because you won't be liked. So I think it may be productive to sort of reframe the conversation and ask this question instead. Are social media the source of the mental health crisis? Or are social media a medium and amplifier of the social problems that make us depressed? I tend to believe that the second option is true. Social media are a medium and amplifier of already existing societal problems. They are not the problem. They mediate social problems through a very clickbait, sensational lens. The far right is taking over Europe. Girls shouldn't go out at night because they risk their lives. That cute scented candle in the background is going to kill me. It's not to say that all those things aren't true, like they have an actual scientific background. But the way they are communicated is really, really stressful. Yeah, let me give you another example to make my point clearer. Dating apps. Everyone and their mother complain about dating apps. They are awful. But are dating apps the problem? Or are they just a medium and amplifier for problems that already exist in society? What are the problems? Ghosting, sexual violence, gender-based discrimination, receiving unwanted sexual content, all those things exist on dating apps. But they did not emerge with dating apps. Those problems have existed for a very long time. So deleting dating apps might be a short-term relief, but the problems will persist. No more pics, that's for sure, but I can guarantee that men will continue to flash in public transports or behind the doors of their office. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do anything about it. We can regulate corporations, keep them accountable so that our experience of social media, dating apps, etc. improves. But for me, social media shouldn't belong to corporations whose primary goal is to sell ads. The internet and social media are wonderful tools for self-discovery, activism, education. I'm sure a lot of you will relate to that experience, but as someone who grew up in a rural area, an area where the far right thrives these days, I'm talking about the north of France, well, I can guarantee that social media was a tool for me to challenge the discourse that I heard growing up and also helped me develop a healthy skepticism towards mainstream media. Actually, recently it allowed me to reconnect with people who also didn't like growing up in that sort of conservative atmosphere and felt isolated for such a long time. We campaigned for the elections for the local progressive candidate, and we knew that it was very likely that we wouldn't win, and indeed the far right won, but still we showed up and we promised to each other that we would stay in touch and continue the fight. I've had this plan of doing a few sessions, educational sessions, kind of what I do with my videos for the people in my area, the area where I grew up. I'm throwing it out there for accountability because I need to work on it before spring. But yeah, when I saw the comments under the poll that I did, I realized that, yeah, a lot of us understand the value of social media, but we're frustrated with the sensationalism, with the feelings of unproductivity, with the amount of time we spend on it. It's all super valid. And if you're struggling with this, I guess my advice would be to not feel the urge to react to everything. Try to preserve your voice, your time and energy to the conversations where you can add the most value. And yeah, send a text to that friend or acquaintance that share progressive stuff online. Maybe you could build a little team and do some interesting things together. Or go check the office of your local progressive candidate. They might need some help with the social media stuff. Out of curiosity, I recently checked the Instagram page of a Green candidate from an area I visit quite regularly. And it was just so bad. I was genuinely shocked by how bad it was. But that's an easy fix for us, the chronically online generation. So yeah, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, the conversation continues in the comments section. Tell me how you feel after a year of back-to-back elections. That was quite stressful. Do you have any plans of organizing something in your area or online? Feel free to share some initiatives as well in the comments. Maybe we can help connect people. But yeah, before I let you go, I need to say a big thank you to my Patreons, especially top tier Patreons: James, Wolfkratz, Sebastian, Gazi Chic, Patrick Button, Jeff, Yelan, Tayab, Nick, Brandon, James Siddle, Ojwal, Pablo, Patrick, Boris, Ria, Ivan, Donage, Alex, Toki, Koriji, Tristan, Christopher France, and Perry. And thank you to the other ones who prefer to stay anonymous. Now finally, let me talk to you about today's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is an all-in-one platform to grow your presence online. They give you a bunch of tools to create your ideal websites. So this is mine so far, alice.cappelleyt. I use it as a platform to kind of share all the work that I do on YouTube, my contributions, but also my book. I also added all my social media accounts. You also have analytical tools. You can run effective email campaigns. On their website, you can also get advice from professionals on how to build your website, etc. So many things you can do. So if you're interested in it, if you want to try it out, then go to squarespace.com to get a free trial. And once you're ready to go public, then you can go to squarespace.com/alice.cappelleyt to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you, Squarespace, for sponsoring the channel. And yeah, that's it. Salut!